So welcome, everyone. We're going to start with a reading from Emmett Fox, and I'm actually combining two readings, both of which are part of a series he did on Psalm 18. And he requests at the beginning of each one that we read Psalm 18. Well, Psalm 18 is 50 verses, so I ain't doing that. But I am going to read the section of Psalm 18, which is relevant to the two commentaries that I'll be reading after that. So, for thou wilt light my lamp, the Lord my God will enlighten my darkness. For through thee I have pursued a band of robbers. Through my God have I leaped over a fence. As for God, his way is perfect. The word of the Lord is pure. He is a help to all those who trust in him. For there is no God save the Lord, and there is no one who is mighty like our God. It is God that girds me with strength and makes my way perfect. He makes my feet like hart's feet, hart being like a goat or an antelope, and sets me upon high places. He trains my hands to war. He strengthens my arms like a bow of brass. Thou hast also given me the shield of thy salvation, and thy right hand hath held me up, and thy discipline hath made me great. And then the Emmett Fox commentary for 4 October, titled The Kindling of God. In verse 28 of the 18th Psalm, the psalmist moves to another phrase of teaching. Thou wilt light my candle, the Lord my God will enlighten my darkness. Many similes have been offered by religious teachers to illustrate the relationship between God and man. One of the best known and most helpful is to think of man as a spark from a great fire, which is God. The spark is not the whole of the fire, but it is part of it, and therefore of the same nature, and possesses potentially all the characteristics of the parent fire. It can ignite many things upon which it falls, thus producing another fire, essentially of the same nature as the original fire. And then for 5 October, the goodness of God. In verse 29 of the 18th Psalm, the psalmist, thinking of some of the times in the past when he has been given power to overcome difficulties and to advance on the path, says, For by thee I have run through a troop, and by my God have I leaped over a wall. Everyone has found himself at some point confronted with a difficulty that seemed like a high and insurmountable wall, but faith in God enables one to clear the obstacle notwithstanding. Next, the psalmist reminds us that the way of God is perfect, and God will put you upon your high place. In other words, he will raise your consciousness so that you will automatically demonstrate. Now, by demonstrate, he means see the results of your actions in God's way. Then the author praises God and thanks him for his goodness. Thanksgiving, as you know, writes Fox, is one of the most powerful forms of prayer. Finally, he says that God gives great deliverance to his king, and that he showeth mercy to his anointed, to David, and to his seed forevermore. God intends us all to be kings through the exercise of spiritual power, and our power to go on increasing like the seed of David through all eternity. So this, in a sense, is a side glance on what I'm talking about today, ideas for living a meaningful life. And the concept came to me because I'd had a conversation with yet one more person who seemed at a loss for what to do. That they could not find a purpose. They felt aimlessly going through life. And that got me thinking also about what people find of value in life. Now, my friend Karen Heister, who at one point was a social worker, shared once something she was taught in her training. And that was, what is important to three different classes of people? And the professor explained, for the lower classes, it's collecting people around you, human relationships, connections, because that's all you're going to have. That's all you got as a poor person, is relying on interconnections with people to help you get through. For the middle classes, the professor said, the question is, how much goods can you acquire? And that reminded me of a wedding I did at a family house once in a lower middle class section of a town, not Cincinnati. When I drove up to the house, it was a very small house. But there were, as I recall, 4 brand new trucks in the driveway. I had to park out on the street. When I walked in, the front room had white shag carpet, easily 3 inches deep, and a big flat screen TV back when those were very expensive. And the father greeting me kept telling me of all the stuff they had. They had 2 more big flat screen TVs. They had a full, what you call it, billiards table downstairs. And he went on with all this and this and this and this. So that's what the professor is referring to. And then the upper classes, the question is, how high is the status of the people you know? Because you want to be associated only with the highest status. And I run into that when I do weddings. If it's an upper class wedding, I cannot get them to participate in the service the way I normally do. Middle class, lower class, they're glad to help out and say things and respond and so forth. Can't get that with upper class. And it finally occurred to me, they're afraid that if they say something and nobody else does, they're going to look foolish and lose status in the eyes of the high status people around them. But the bigger problem is this kind of finding meaning is dependent on outside factors. It's not within you. You're depending on what you can gather around you. And that leaves you very vulnerable. There's a lot of talk and a lot of people who promote success, but I came across a statement recently, and I don't remember the author's name, I'm sorry. But the author wrote, I spent much of my life seeking success that would be noticed and appreciated by others. I have discovered that finding success in the eyes of others is a hollow achievement. I should have been seeking success that meant something in my eyes. So that's the first question to look at when you're wondering about finding purpose in life. What is meaningful? What is going to be meaningful in a way that is solid for you? Now, medical studies have shown consistently that people who have a strong purpose in life, a strong moral drive or a strong ethical drive being part of that, tend to live much longer, healthier, happier lives. So sort of, if every day that when you wake, you know that you're going to be doing something that's going to be contributing to this earth, to all that live on it, you're likely going to be living a longer, healthier, happier life. But then there's a question, what is that purpose? How are you going to find it? How are you going to know it? And I want to explore that issue from several angles. First of all, let me define the scope of what we might see as a personally meaningful or successful life. And the late comedian Jerry Clower had a saying which addresses this somewhat indirectly. He said, and I've modified it slightly to update it for this age, because he said this 20, 30 years ago. He said, regardless of your occupation, whether you drive a truck, dig a ditch, milk a cow, sweep a street, program a computer, run a business, fly a plane, set government policies which affect the lives of millions, or teach or raise some children, If you're doing that job to the best of your ability, then you are successful. If you're not giving your honest best, then you aren't successful. So that's calling on each of us to look at our inner drives, our inner production of moving through life. And to have a purpose in life doesn't mean that you need to achieve something in a big way or achieve big results. To have purpose, to have meaning, to find contentment and satisfaction in your walk. Yeah, examples of big people who got big results. Mahatma Gandhi. He never set out to be, but he was. Martin Luther King, both presidents, Roosevelt. Teddy Roosevelt is someone we wish, I really wish we had right now, because one of his statements was, you can tell the greatness of a nation by how we treat the poorest of our citizens. Mother Teresa, and I should note that she never set out to do what she ended up doing. All she knew was that she was called to go to India. And in some sense, this is true of many of them. I don't know about King. Gandhi certainly never knew that he was going to end up doing this stuff. Teddy Roosevelt started out a failure. He was flunking in school. No one knew that he couldn't read, couldn't see. Nelson Mandela, Cesar Chavez. Those all are people, everybody knows their names. But there are also people who are still known, but lesser known. Most people never heard of them. Dorothy Day of the Catholic Worker Movement. Those who interacted with that had their lives changed. Saul Alinsky, you've probably never heard of him. He was the most effective community organizer I've ever heard of or seen anywhere. He could take communities that were the most downtrodden and help them gain power, gain their self-respect, and gain control of their lives and their community. Maria Montessori, the way that what she created to help people, kids, grow into wholeness and okayness. Boy, I wish that had been around in a way that my mother could have put me into it. I would have had such a much better experience in education, and I might have gotten more out of it. But then there's people even smaller that you'll never have heard of. And what I'm trying to do is give you freedom to follow your calling, irrespective of whether you're going to save one thing or be saving millions. Ray Shoemaker, Phyllis's father, in his retirement, he was a major force in his downtrodden community in helping it regain its power and become a far better community. My friend Wilson Palmer, he's the one who helped us set up the charter for this church because he had background in that. He helps us do our bookkeeping because none of us can do it here. He doesn't, no one knows about it except I'm mentioning it now. The board's aware of it. He gives because he can. He doesn't ask anything for it. There's a couple I read about recently who have welcomed 12 foster children over 20 years into their lives and have helped the vast majority of them move into a successful, happy adulthood. They haven't asked for any recognition. A reporter found them. My mother, who taught first grade, the amount of caring that she gave each individual student in a community where a lot of kids were mistreated was so potent that as long as she worked in their school, these kids, even in college or after graduating college, would stop by to talk to her about their lives. She didn't set out to have that effect. She set out for each child to grow as much as possible in her classroom. And there's a couple I know here who moved into Cincinnati, intentionally moved into not only one of the poorest districts, but one of the poorest districts with the most child abuse. and the most children who are not being fed by their parents. And they opened their doors. So children had a safe place to come and where they could always get a meal. Each of these is following what their calling is. Sometimes not even knowing that that was their calling. Not expecting anything other than the satisfaction of doing something that made the world a better place, something that they cared about. Now, it's my experience and observation, and some of you may be able to say otherwise, that it's not all that often you're given a roadmap to what your purpose is. You're going to stumble over it. Now, I've known people who kept holding back. Well, I don't know if this is my passion. I don't know if this is my purpose. I'm not sure if I should do this. Or maybe I should wait. Well, all of that is precluding the opportunity for you to fall into your purpose, into your meaning in life. The only way to do it is to walk forward, trusting in the divine to guide your steps, which is what Fox was talking about here. Now, I've mentioned before, I'll mention again within this context. Each day, when I start the day, I talk to my spirit animals, the angels, everybody else, and say, show me what to do today. What I'm doing now, being a minister, what I'm doing with Lyft, I never had any idea I'd end up doing this stuff. But it's the most fulfilling stuff I've ever done in my life. And I'm grateful that God set it up so I could fall into it. I sort of liken it to, in France, the bocage area, where around the farm fields are hedges that have grown up for centuries. So there's banks of earth with hedges growing out, the road going down here, but the road is 10 or 12 feet below even the farm fields because this is the only way you can go. And if you try to go across, all you're doing is battling hedges. But if you're trying to force your way through, you're going to fall into the road. And if you're going to be blind, you're going to go right across the road and run into another bush. You have to relax and do what's set in front of you. Well, you don't have to, but I recommend it. Because maybe that's it, or maybe that's the next step to prepare you. For me, who'd have thunk that my stumbling into doing performing would prepare me for what I do now? Who'd have thunk that my being diagnosed as incurably mentally ill and my deciding that God could help me find a better way would end up with what I'm doing now? Who'd have thunk that my stumbling into a Friday night service by Sister Pepper in a place I'd never been before, didn't know where it was, would lead me to what I'm doing now? That is not to say, by the way, that there's only one purpose for you in this life. You may fulfill one purpose and it's time for another, which is just fine. So what I've seen enough people say is they were just living life the best way they could figure out. And in some cases, the best way they could figure out while also trying to be representatives of a loving divine. And their purpose, they realized they were on it at some point without actually being aware they'd stumbled on it. And that's cool. So sort of what I want to close with, I came across over the last couple of weeks a whole bunch of quotes that have to do with, they're sort of meditations, with connecting yourself with divine energy, with the divine, and from there moving forward to an ever more fulfilling, more meaningful life. I won't bother with the names. If anyone asks, I'll be glad to send copies of this with the names, the attributions, after the service. So here's one. It is only in the constant nurturing of the spiritual life that we can experience the tenderness, the courage, and the faith to make transforming power a way of life to overcome evil. And to remind you, evil means low frequency. It is an act of faith to live each day with integrity and love, even when we are distinctly in the minority. Do a small action every day toward the transformation that you seek within yourself and in the world. Who are we to judge whether our efforts bear fruit? If we act in a spirit of humility and informed goodwill, we should be very slow to draw conclusions about cause and effect. The test is not whether an act is effective by the world's standards, but whether it is rightly motivated. There is more to the experience of God than being plucked out of this world. The fuller experience, I am sure, is of a love which sends us out into the world. And trust the Lord trust that God is present to us, speaks to us, is living and merciful, and has work for us to do. Now, another lens, as I was writing this, it occurred to me that you might consider in your life choices as you wend your way through all the instability that is this world. What sort of legacy will be left once you're gone? Now, I mentioned Ray Shoemaker as one, Phyllis's father, certainly Maria Montessori, but I'm going to share from my own personal experience, people whom you've never heard of, but boy, they saved me. I owe a deep gratitude to several men who, without being asked, gave of themselves to me in ways that helped me find the strength to survive and have the courage to find a way to get well. I owe a deep debt of gratitude to Bill Hayden, who met me at a work camp and essentially served as a foster father to me during college and into my adult life, providing me with information about how the world worked, being a support structure I could talk to. To this day, I miss him. Missing my father? No. Missing him? Yes. Then there was a neighbor man when I was in elementary school. I'd forgotten his name, but he would take me to father-son events. He didn't have children of his own. So he took me, and he was so proud to have me with him. And it was the first time I'd experienced a man who was glad to be with me. I owe him so much. There was David Myers, who met me when he was doing transactional analysis. And long after he'd retired from that, he still stayed in contact with me, still served as a teacher, as a supporter, perhaps as another father figure. Without him, I wouldn't be where I am today. Then, on a sort of side note, there's someone in Phyllis's life, I don't even know the person's name, and I don't know all that much of Phyllis's life, but she has mentioned to me a debt she owes to a woman where she was working as a secretary, who said to her one day, "Why are you not going to college? You certainly have the brains for it," or some such. I may not be accurate in the words. And that was the first time Phyllis thought she might be worth and good enough to do something other than just be a secretary. And without that woman having said that to her, I probably would not have had 28 wonderful years with the woman who was my life. And boy, what a gift. So if you think on your own lives, I'm sorry, this really gets to me. If you think on your own lives, aren't there some people who've served as unexpected angels who helped your life move forward in ways you otherwise might not have been able to? And perhaps there are some people, if you think about it, where you've served as an angel to help them move forward. Maybe you didn't feel it was much at the time, but that doesn't matter. But perhaps your contribution was just adding a dab more meaning to your life as you realize that you did have an impact on someone, the life you're walking in and through on this earth right now. So to sort of wrap things up, I suggest that even if now you feel uncertain about your calling, be patient. Keep walking. You may well be doing your calling or preparing for your calling right now. And I say that irrespective of how many years experience you already have on this earth. And you might find that your calling and your experience of this earth changes as you add more years to this body in which you're residing. And what an adventure all this is. So that's what I have to say, folks. Anyone have something to share? Yes, Ellie.
I like what you were saying today, focusing on, Psalms 18 and how Emmett Fox brought a lot of things out. The spark and the fire, the characteristics of the divine. And then you were talking about, what success is, how it's measured. A lot of people measure it by money. A lot of people measure it by things, but you were saying to, measure it to how it is best to ourselves. And, that's different for everybody, especially those of us that have invisible diseases. And so every day is a challenge of what we can and can't do. So, and we've had to accept those things, what we can and can't do. And so then that success looks different for each of us. And you were saying, you were going with people that, we may not have heard of, that were successful. A few people had come to my mind. Helen Keller. For those that don't know, she was blind, deaf, and mute. Her parents didn't know how to handle her. So they called a teacher, Anne Sullivan, and she taught Helen Keller how to communicate. And then Helen Keller went on to become who she was. But she wouldn't have been anything without her mentor. Another one was Tesla with electricity. He wanted to give it to the world for free. And of course, the government didn't want that. They wanted to charge it. But Tesla thought that everyone needed electricity to use it for their own purposes, not to pay for it. Another person was Corrie ten Boom. I don't know their last names, but, they smuggled Bibles between the Iron Curtain, Russia, and the Bamboo Curtain, China. Brother Andrew and Brother David said, I don't know their last names, but they were missionaries. So were they successful? You could talk to many people today that would say yes, because they shared something that was precious, that they could have died for. Many people did. So, success is measured on different levels for different people. as I'm reading the different books I'm reading now, women's gifts, I think some of us take for granted of the gifts that we have. Um, I look at, being able to have the freedom to look at the cards, to explore spirituality, to look at some of those things. But in the not so recent past, women were burned because of that. We were burned for having the herbal knowledge to make someone feel better. We were, to own land. We couldn't do that. We were persecuted because of those things. So I mean, I could go on and on, but I'm sure Brian, you get where I'm going with that. Um, so we're successful in those things. We can own property now. We can work in the workplace. We don't have to have, as women, a man's signature to have what we have. And to some of us, that is huge. The fact that we can sign our own name to things, where again, in the not so distant past, a man had to do that for us. Are we equal? No, not by a long shot. But can we hold our own? Yes, we can. So again, there's many areas where success is measured that some people wouldn't even give it a second thought. Women that have come through domestic violence, that's a success. We're alive. Many women did not make it. So again, a measure of success that sometimes we don't think about. So thank you, Brian, for your talk today.
Welcome. Speaking of women breaking new ground, some of you may not have read that the new Archbishop of Canterbury is a woman. A sidebar to that is that her calling as a priest came, I think it was when she was in her 50s, and she's 66 now. She was doing other stuff before then. And here she is, head of the Anglican Communion, or the Anglican. So again, we don't know where our callings are going to lead us. We thank the divine for having brought us all here, for having shown us love this week, for having guided us, for having helped us move forward in the divine, for having given us things to do to help the world. We thank the divine for having delivered us from troubles, having worked miracles in our lives, having helped us to grow in wisdom, in caring, and raise our own frequencies toward the divine. We give thanks for guiding our steps as we depart from here, showing us what to do and guiding us back next week. We give full glory and full gratitude to the divine. We say thank you, thank you, thank you for all this good and all this love. And amen.